Kia ora and welcome to Forest Call. I'm Don Carson. The risk of fire increases with global warming. According to Scion Fire Researchers in Christchurch, we are going to get some more fires with it, but some of them will be out of control extreme fires. I caught up with Tara Strandon, the fire research team at Scion in Christchurch recently. They've been learning from the Port Hills fire in 2017, an extreme fire.
So New Zealand's actually been lucky in the sense that it's a maritime climate. So we haven't had the big, high, extreme fire impact that the big continents, Australia and North America, have had. Nevertheless, it is coming to New Zealand, and we have seen those extreme fires pick up the pace and increase in their occurrence over recent years. The outlook is for New Zealand to have an increase in extreme fires in the number and in the size, as well as an increase in the severity of those fires.
So when you say extreme fire, for you that's a technical term?
Yes, so the definition of extreme fire is any fire, big or small, so it doesn't have to be those large fires that we see in Australia and North America. It could be a small fire that has rapid fire spread. So fire that is moving at a pace that cannot be put out. So in other words, it's moving so fast that all of our firefighting skill, whether it's helicopter or ground, cannot actually put that fire out. You could only go down several kilometers and try to break a line in order to slow that fire down. So we've gone to a whole new level, so something in the interaction with meteorology, terrain, and fuels has switched in such a way that this fire has now become unstoppable. It's putting out so much heat that there's no way water or suppressants can actually stop this fire. So it's entered a whole new regime. So before that, if a fire is there and exists, especially New Zealand has direct tactics where they put out the fire with buckets and water, etc. Once we go into the extreme level, that's no longer possible. According to the prediction, it's always hard, of course, to really get it down to the actual numbers, but the increase shows us that we should definitely see it about every year to every other year where we would have an extreme fire. Now again, remember, it's not necessarily a large fire or a long fire, but it is an extreme fire. The Port Hills fire was definitely an extreme fire. It was an extreme fire when it started. It started with very fast fire spread, running uphill under a high wind condition. And then it had some unusual behavior on its third day, both early in the morning, so it spread down to Governor's Bay. It had very fast downhill spread, which is unique in a fire. Usually downhill it moves slower, and we could direct attack it at that point, but in this case it moved very fast. And then of course the day in the afternoon when all the evacuations occurred and civil defense was called into effect, we had extreme fire spread. There was even an observation of either a large fire whirl or a fire tornado during that burn. The forest fire is quite different because the fuels can be built up, so we're talking about large fuels, and if the fire has entered the canopy, we're now running into the canopy and we're impacting the canopy, which means it's a very big fire, a lot of heat's coming out of that fire. It's going to be very difficult to directly stop. Likely the tactics will be step back and dig line around that fire, and that's why it's important to have some of the tools we've developed at the ready. So for example, if there's an ignition, suddenly you know there's a fire in the forest, you can get to it quicker. If you get to it quicker, you could hit it before it reaches that extreme layer, and then it's off to the races.
Grant, we all know that room heaters are either radiation or convection heaters, two types of heating, but you're telling me that the established wisdom for how fire spread since the 1940s was that it was a radiation. You're now questioning that.
For fires to spread across the landscape, they have to preheat the unburned vegetation, the fuel ahead of the flame front. So the long-held traditional view is that flames spread through radiated heat from the flame. The new theory, based on some lab experiments out of the US Forest Service's Missoula Fire Sciences lab, is that the convected heat, the movement of hot air, is now believed to be much more important in spreading fires. These measurements that we're taking for the purpose of the research lead to an improved understanding of the fire behaviour characteristics, which then we can combine with new information out of high resolution weather models, improved information from GIS about how fuels change across the landscape, how the terrain changes, and all of that contributes to a better understanding of the way fires ignite and spread. Lead to better models for predicting the way fires will spread. And then those new models, those improved models, can then go into the decision support tools that are available to fire managers to predict the way fires will spread across the landscape.
So what it does is it simulates fire across the landscape. We can see the direction of the fire and what values might be at threat, like homes or forests or farms. It can also give firefighters an idea of how hot the fire might get, and also how fast the fire is travelling as well. And that can give them an idea of the numbers of firefighters or the numbers of resources to fight that fire. If we did it by hand, it could just take a little bit more slower, and then the accuracy of these predictions won't be as great without Prometheus. During the Port Hills fire response, we provided fire behaviour information to our firefighters. So what we're looking at here is hot spots that came in from the drones that flew over each morning, and then we ran Prometheus, and what this was able to tell them were areas where they didn't need to send resources, so they could focus their resources on this side of the fire.
Richard, what have we got here?
This is a long stem thermometer, and we use it for looking for the hot ground after a fire is burnt through an area. So we're looking for hot spots, areas that are still burning. And the thermometer can pick up the soil temperature, and then if we probe it into something that's still burning, the temperature is going to be a lot higher, so we can spot the hot spots very easily. So what we've found is that the thermometer works very well, and so we're looking at being able to push the thermometer into a pile of slash, and there's been a problem with spontaneous combustion where the decomposing material heats up, and so if we've got the thermometer in the pile of slash, we'll be able to tell if it's heating up, and then we may also be able to attach this thermometer to a radio network. So then from a distance, from back at the office, you could pick up if the slash pile is heating up or not.
So I went off up into the Port Hills to look at the aftermath of that extreme fire with Scion social scientist Lisa Langer. The damage in many places is still evident. Lisa, like her colleagues, is looking forward though and talking about resilience.
Resilience is a strong community, one that will bounce back, and one that I see is really aware of the risks but are very much prepared for those risks. In the fire context, we want to see awareness of the fire risks, safe use of fire, but preparedness for wildfire events. And the preparedness is not just in the physical sense, but also with communities being strong and networked and looking after one another. So very much a together community. We talk about future proofing of communities, and certainly working with communities, particularly our Maori community. The desire is to really be future proofed and work with the agencies in overcoming that. As a community, we do use fire, and we're not trying to prevent the use of fire, but it's really important that there's safe use of fire. There is a system of restricted and fire bans within the country and permit requirements, but the essence of it is very much around safe practices, mitigation, so not lighting when it's inappropriate, and if a fire is lit, really thinking through the consequences of if it was to escape and being prepared for that. There's a very good website that people can go to, get their information and find out what's required in any part of the country, and use that to guide them.
And the Forest Growers Levy is contributing to that Scion research. And you saw that website, the information website in that, and we're also using the levy money to help with the awareness campaign. You'll see more of that coming up this summer, the fire season.